Onslaught, the 27th Magic the Gathering expansion set, is one of the most beloved of all time. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the set, the history of its financials, how it affected Standard back in the day, which card is the best card from the set, and a lot more. If you enjoy history lessons about awesome sets, you've come to the right place. If you've missed previous episodes focusing on other sets and want to catch up, you can do that right here. We've done Best Cards Ever episodes on Urza's Saga, Champions of Kamigawa, Mirrodin, Shards of Alara, and more. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Onslaught was the first set of its namesake block, released in early October of 2002. During this general time period in Magic, creature quality was on the rise, and Onslaught took that to the next level. Focused heavily on tribal support, Onslaught would come to impact tribal strategies in various formats for years to come. All about the creature types. Some other interesting notes about Onslaught. It began the last block that focused on a Dominaria-based timeline. Wizards wouldn't go back to Dominaria until Time Spiral years later. Also, Onslaught block was the last block before the modern card frame was implemented. Interesting. While Onslaught did make a name for itself with tribal support, which we'll talk about soon enough, it also introduced and reintroduced some key mechanics we still use today. The flagship mechanic of the set was Morph. First introduced right here, Morph added a whole new dynamic to Magic. Since this was already a creature-based set, there were plenty of Morph creatures to go around. As a matter of fact, the entire block abused the Morph mechanic in a big way, making it one of the more impactful keywords. Morph was so popular, and the applications were so vast, that it came back later in Time Spiral block, and again just recently in Khans of Tarkir. Onslaught was also the first set that actually used the keyword Fear. Now, the ability had existed before, but Onslaught coined the term. Of course, this wouldn't last forever, as Intimidate then replaced Fear many years later. And, as luck would have it, Intimidate didn't last too long, as Menace replaced that as an evergreen keyword in Magic Origins, so fun. Right, time to get back on track. Cycling came back for the first time in a long time, and Wizards really pushed it. The goal was to introduce newer players to the mechanic, and to do this, they included a few very powerful cards in Astral Slide and Lightning Rift. Talk about power. In addition, like I've said before, Onslaught was big on tribal support, and it brought with it several high-powered tribal-based lords in all colors. Fun fact, these lords were eroded not to include the creature type lord later on. Gotta love fun facts. Before we get into past prices and the history of the set in Constructed, there are just a few more cycles we need to focus on. Remember, the set took place in Dominaria, and what's Dominaria without pit fighters? Jareth, Arcanus, Visara, Rorix, and Silvos are all incredibly popular cards, but this is where they were created. The last super important cycle I want to talk about, Fetchlands. That's right, the allied colored Fetchlands have Onslaught to call home. A revolutionary new color-fixing cycle. We all know how impactful Fetchlands have been. Alright, time to jump into the past. Thanks to an awesome viewer, we actually have the prices of each card in the set on release. That's right, we get a snapshot in time. At the time of release, the most expensive card in Onslaught was Blistering Firecat at a whopping $8. Utilizing the new Morph mechanic, the Firecat could flip and decimate players out of nowhere with its 7 power and trample. The reason it was so expensive on release was because everyone saw it and immediately thought Second Coming of Ball Lightning, which hadn't been printed in an expansion set since 5th edition. Can't really blame players for freaking out too much. Also sitting at $8 at release, Grinning Demon. Much like the Firecat reminding players of Ball Lightning, this demon reminded them of Huzam Jin, one of the most infamous and powerful creatures printed in early Magic. Relatively low mana cost, huge power and toughness, and you get hurt every turn. While Onslaught isn't considered early Magic, a 4-mana 6/6 you can sneak onto the battlefield is quite good here. Very powerful card. Next to those two, there were a small handful of cards at $7 on release. Exalted Angel, Quicksilver Dragon, and Ravenous Bailiff. Each of these creatures were considered very high quality at the time of release. Exalted Angel was just absurd. A flying 4/5 with essentially lifelink and morph to sneak it out, that's crazy. Quicksilver Dragon, giant flying creature, and it comes with protection against single targeted removal on the cheap, another no-brainer. And Ravenous Bailiff, a 4-mana 4/4 beast with no drawback and an engine that basically stopped you from dying. All solid cards. These were the all-stars when the set first came out. Another fun fact, each of the Fetchlands were $5 to $6 on release. If only they knew what we know now. Ha, if only. Onslaught came into Standard during an extremely volatile time in the format. Before the set was released, the format was made up of 7th Edition, Invasion, Apocalypse, Planeshift, Odyssey, Torment, and Judgment. Needless to say, there was a lot to work with. The problem? 2 decks stood above the rest, by far. The first was Psychotog, which was a disturbingly powerful control/combo deck, and the second was Blue-Green Madness. Now, this may not seem like an actual problem, but the issue is that Odyssey block had all these important cards. So when the format rotated, Onslaught came in, Invasion, Apocalypse, and Planeshift were all gone, it didn't change anything. Psychotog and Madness were still outrageously powerful in this new standard. So what happened to Onslaught? Here's what happened. Onslaught began its standard rotation by bleeding into both Psychotog and Madness. Psychotog decks gladly added Polluted Delta and Smother to its ranks. Half of the Blue-Green Madness players didn't change a thing in their decks besides adding Fetchlands, but the other half? They turned into Red-Green Madness Flashback Morph. Basking Root Wall and Wild Mongrel stood next to Blistering Firecat and Rorik's Bladewing, creating a ruthless aggro deck that any Gruul player would be proud of. Of course, it didn't take long for Onslaught to find its foothold, and then things got a bit out of hand. Seemingly out of nowhere, a powerful deck called Astroglide surfaced in late 2002. Utilizing the bonkers abilities of both Astroslide and Lightning Rift, this red-white deck dominated the standard format. The goal is to get a creature with an enter the battlefield effect like Taro's Faithful or Pardic Arsonist. Get Astroslide and Lightning Rift onto the field, then just cycle the rest of your deck, blinking your Arsonist and triggering the Rift over and over again. You gain a ton of life, deal a ton of damage, and just keep drawing cards. In late 2002, next to Blue-Green Madness, this was one of the more powerful and popular strategies. Of course, while all this was going on, another deck was quickly gaining ground, top-8ing event after event. It's time to talk Goblins. Remember how Onslaught was supposed to help tribes? It did, it just helped Goblins more than the others. Led by Goblin Piledriver and Sparksmith, the Goblin deck became the premier tribal strategy, annihilating creature-based and spell-based decks alike. Protection from blue was something that most players just couldn't deal with. Along with Goblin Burrows, Goblin King, Goblin Sledder, and Skirk Prospector, the Goblin Sly deck was a force to be reckoned with. Only 2 months after this deck took form, Legions was released, bringing with it Goblin Goon and Clickslither, 2 more auto-includes in the already disturbingly aggressive tribal strategy. Don't get it twisted. While all these goblins were certainly powerful in Standard, Goblin Piledriver would be the goblin that stood the test of time, still leading eternal goblin decks to victory. Friggin' goblins, man. The last strategy I want to discuss is Beasts. That's it, it's just called Beasts. Remember Ravenous Bailiff? That guy had some variations built around him. Contested Cliffs was the most popular card to pair with the Bailiff, of course, but additionally the deck simply ran other good beasts in Standard. Crozan Tusker, Avarax, Tephroderm, then Legions include Canopy Crawler. The deck looked to one-up its opponents on the ground and just never die. Fun stuff. But it didn't really finish coming together until after Legions came out. When it's all said and done, Onslaught certainly made an impact on Standard, creating a new powerful control strategy in Astroglide, a new tribal deck in Goblins, and a new aggressive deck in Red-Green Beats. Besides Blue-Green Madness, Onslaught impacted most strategies in the format and will be remembered as a mostly fun and interactive set. With all that said, it's time to talk current prices. Let's see how our release day big money cards have fared. After its stint in Standard, Blistering Firecat quickly dropped off the map, dropping from its original price of $8 to a whopping $1. So much value. Grinning Demon, once $8, is now, wait for it, 30 cents. I know, great stuff. Exalted Angel, Quicksilver Dragon, and Ravenous Bailiff, all $7 each in 2002, now $1, 50 cents, and 30 cents respectively. I gotta say, if we're talking about retaining value, these particular high money cards did not do so well. So it did do well. The Fetchlands. Releasing at $6 each, the Onslaught versions of the allied Fetchlands all command a hefty price tag now, with Polluted Delta leading the charge at a cool $35. Now that's a rate of return. If we look at the most expensive non-Fetchland cards, we see a plethora of Commander staples. Aggravated Assault leads the charge at a cool $10 after being $4 at release. Played in Narset, Aurelia, Kalia, and more, Aggravated Assault is definitely one of the most popular non-Fetchland cards from Onslaught. After the Assault, we're looking at Patriarch's Bidding at $10, $3 on release, then Echoes at $9, $3 at release, and Weathered Wayfarer at $9, $5 on release. Not a huge uptick in price for most of these cards, but a real solid commander presence in the set for sure. It's respectable. So which card from Onslaught's the best? Now that we have all this information and history, which card's the absolute best? Oblation, Aggravated Assault, Insurrection, and Explosive Vegetation are all solidly powerful commander cards. The cycling land cycle is seen play in several Eternal formats, along with, of course, Commander. Enchantress's presence is a staple in Legacy Enchantress decks. Goblin Pile Driver is continued force to be reckoned with in Legacy, and has a place in history forever as one of the most powerful goblins ever printed. But honestly, none of this matters. The Fetchlands are the best cards in Onslaught. Easiest question and answer we've had in the series. The Fetchlands spread throughout Magic like wildfire and haven't come down in popularity since, seeing play in every single format possible. Vintage, Legacy, Modern, recently Standard, Commander, anywhere you can think of, Fetchlands exist. Welcome to the most powerful cards from a set full of powerful cards. What did you think of Onslaught? Learn anything new? Do you like the set? Dislike it? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Personally, Onslaught was one of my favorite sets and I loved playing Magic during that time. It was full of flavor, huge creatures, exciting stories, and my favorite card ever, Ixidor Reality Sculptor. Come on, it's genius. Anyways, if you want to see more best cards ever in the future, let me know which sets you'd like us to cover in the comments. If you see someone else with a suggestion you like, be sure to give them a thumbs up. Super easy. As always, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time. This video is brought to you in part by TCGplayer.com. Speaking of Fetchlands, the cons versions of Fetchlands are still crazy cheap based on how powerful they are. Seriously, they're real cheap. You can get copies of Polluted Delta right now for $11. $11 for the blue-black Fetchland. That's amazing. Dimir not your thing. No problem. How about Wooded Foothills? $13 each. This is a crazy time for Magic. You need fetches? TCG Player has fetches. Click the links, help the channel, win-win.